Yeah, so you'd be looking at somebody who's scaled a sales org from 10 million to 100 million. If I were looking at, like if I were going to go buy in, right, to PhoneSales, the first thing I would do is hire. And the litmus test that I have for high-level talent is that I should.
PhoneSales.com, in collaboration with Alex Hormozi.
Explain to me how the franchise works.
Yeah, so we have a lot of clients that want to work with us, and we have a lot of closers that want to work with us. And Jovan and I, we just can't manage everything ourselves. It's just too many people. We had two options. Option number one is place managers to replace us, right? And then give like 2 to 3 accounts, client accounts to each manager so they can manage them, obviously, and we can scale that way. The problem with that was that managers only get paid so much and they only care so much about the business itself, right? But when it comes to partners, they get 50% cut. They get exactly what we are getting, 50-50.
The franchise thing is interesting because I feel like you would be able to achieve that simply with a profit share rather than getting investment and equity and all because if speed is the goal, then you could basically do the makeshift in terms, because like I'm assuming many of them aren't planning on selling, right? And so the only reason the equity would be valuable is if they're going to sell it sometime in the future. And buying, quote, more locations isn't really a thing either. I would imagine that just like it'd be a lot faster to just contract, basically put legal language around getting a profit share in the structure, the cut that you have. Like many companies have scaled sales orgs. You know what I mean? Like insurance brokerages are just massive sales orgs. Like real estate agents are massive sales orgs. And so they don't necessarily have equity, you know what I mean? Equity deals, because those can just get litigious and there's lawyers and I'm sure you guys have already seen this, like it just takes more time. And I feel like there might be, like you could probably remove a couple of the components to get the same behavior, which is ultimately what you're trying to do, is get people who act like owners. So that's me just shooting right off the cuff of just looking at it.
So that's kind of why we kind of came up with the franchise model, to put like a nice barrier there. So it's for people who like have the experience in the space of running an agency or like scaling, managing high ticket sales teams, but now you're getting like the infrastructure that we've kind of built over the past 4 years.
I mean, you could still do all that without the franchise agreement, but what problem are you solving? Why are you not bigger?
It's a management problem, just in general. With bringing on more partners and doing it faster and doing it more in a more organized way. Yeah. So what you said, it does make sense, because that will remove some friction and it would allow us to bring more people without risking, the equity in any way.
I mean, based on the model you have, you guys can own 100% of the, like the franchisor. But even if it was just like, the main co, you can still have streams because you have the software. So tracking becomes the issue, but since you already have that infrastructure built, the ability to just make sure that they get overrides. Now, if you want to put, a $10,000 buy-in or something, just because you feel like that increases commitment levels, I mean, that's fine. But if you look at like a Chick-fil-A, for example, are you familiar with their model?
Yeah.
Right, and so they, each location probably costs, I actually don't know the build-out cost, but I would imagine it costs at least $1 million, probably 1.5 to build a location for Chick-fil-A, and the operators put $10,000 in. And so it's more of a symbolic gesture than it is like them actually, contributing capital to whatever the thing is, but they actually don't own equity in the business. So they get a 50-50 profit share after a royalty that goes to Holdco. Just looking at what they've been able to build, it seems that structure works without the equity in terms of eliciting the behavior that you guys are going for. But from everything that you said, even right at the beginning, you were like, well, we needed something that was more scalable because obviously we had lots of people. There's many people who have scaled businesses with lots of people. And so it sounds like it's actually a talent deficit. Like you need to hire somebody or bring someone who's a high level operator who has scaled a sales driven org. What's revenue right now?
Revenue for the phone sales organization?
Sure.
Well, every month is different, around like 4 million right now.
Per month, is that GMV? So like gross sales volume, and then you're getting 20-25% on that. Yeah. So you'd be looking at somebody who's scaled a sales org from 10 million to 100 million, and who's really ops heavy. So you'd want somebody who looks like who's very leadership driven, not a systems person. That's not the right person. You're looking for somebody who you admire. Take this the way I mean it. You need an adult, right? That's not a function of age. Just saying you need someone who has experience doing this. Because if I were looking at, like if I were going to go buy in, right, to PhoneSales, the first thing I would do is hire an operator. Because right now, all the things that you've described have been people issues. So if I'm operating on the theory of constraint, which is what we do, I would say, okay, well then people issues seem to be the main problem for this business. So I'm going to hire somebody who has experience in this particular domain in a sales org who has gone from X to Z.
The $1 million question, where do you find such people?
Well, you guys are sales guys, right? So it's outbound. Outbound's the easiest thing to do. You could also run ads, but the best people already have jobs. And I mean, you guys know this from your business, right? And so it would be outreach. Outreach is the easiest thing to do. Go to LinkedIn, and LinkedIn has so many tools now. Like search for people who meet these, these 3 or 4 job titles. Probably like a senior vice president or a VP of sales. Sales director might be a little too low, but probably a VP of sales or VP of sales ops, something like that. Like you'll have to play with the title. It is kind of like an ad in advertising. Like you have to play to figure out when you get the right avatars on the phone. But as soon as you get it to click, then you're like, okay, these are the types of people I want. And then you talk to as many as you can. And the litmus test that I have for high level talent is that I should be learning from them on the phone call. So if I feel like I have to teach them stuff, they're not the right person. Like if they're teaching me things, which is also great because then you can keep taking notes, and after 20 or 30 phone calls, you're like, okay, I have a very good idea of what excellent looks like, and I can make a more educated decision on the type of person that I want. But that person who's very operational should be a people-driven leader, especially in this type of org.
For the second part of this call, we would like to just bring our partners too, and just ask them sales question in general and learn from you.
Yeah. With our model, do you believe that we should utilize group selling methods like webinars, seminars, events? That way we can compress the time frame we make money, or just focus on one-to-one sales?
I think it depends on the product that's being sold.
Usually products above $30,000, and that's why we're focusing on like one-to-one model right now.
I think you can do, so the way that I like building sales orgs is having repeated sales materials and then individualized. So like repeated sales materials are going to be like the VSLs, the webinars, things like that. But you're not closing on those webinars, you're just qualifying and setting. And so I want sales guys to be doing as little information spewing as humanly possible, and really being able to start the call with, so you ready to buy? And then yes or no, and then work your way. So you have 60 minutes to close rather than, okay, great, now like discovery. Like let me talk to you about how we might be able to help you. Because then sales guys get really tired of saying the exact same pitch, then they sound like robots, then they get zoned out because they're saying something and they're not listening. And so the talk ratios get way off. And so I prefer having as much of the standardized information sharing being done before the call so that the closer's time can be maximized to closing rather than just like teaching. But I wouldn't be trying to pitch 30K stuff directly to a payment page. I'd probably be pitching that to, qualifier set calls.
Yeah, that's how we're doing it right now. But we've seen some other people, they have like live webinars, and they have the sales guys on the live webinars. And even though they're selling super high ticket offers, they try to like do that communication/information stage of the call, like just through the chat. And then once they show a level of interest, then they get them on the call.
Well, they're using the webinar as the set.
Correct.
At the end of the day, there's a certain amount of information that someone needs to have, or a certain amount of like exposure that they have to a brand or a product for them to make a buying decision. And so that can be a long set and then a short close. It can be a set webinar close. It can be a long webinar then a close. Like there's just a certain amount of selling. The runway for the plane has to be a certain length. Doesn't really matter where you slice it. It just has, like, this is amount that the majority of people need to have before making a purchasing decision. Now, some people might need less, and that's okay because they probably got it beforehand from other things that they've consumed. So if you want to say, okay, how do I sell? Well, I want to increase the likelihood that the highest percentage of people buy, then I want to create an experience that the highest percentage people get all of the information that they need prior to the closing conversation. And so if you do a webinar as a big set thing, to me, that's the same. That's all the same. Like if you run ads to webinar, ads to VSL, then they go to a scheduler, or if you have a live call team where you have a number that becomes the CTA and then the call team's answering calls in real time. Operationally, I wouldn't upend my entire business because of just a slightly different way of doing it, because I think it's more happy to glad. As long as your throughput is good and you're making money and you're growing right now, I don't know if that would be the constraint of the business. So like I think the stuff that we were talking about earlier, like that seems more of the constraint than kind of the individual tactics in the example you gave.
What's your method for building trust and credibility on a sales call in like the fastest way possible? Like what approach do you often take for that?
Well, brand matters more than anything, like right off the bat. And the vast majority of like the hard closing tactics and hard sales tactics have to exist in lieu of not having a brand, right? It's like we have to make up all this hard stuff. It's kind of like in the Matrix when it's like, when you're good enough, you won't have to dodge bullets. Or like you're saying, I can dodge bullets. It's like, well, when you're ready, you won't have to. So like the brand is when you're ready, you won't have to. But if you don't have that, which is the big thing that you should have, but if you don't have that, then it's the same things that you would normally do. You're going to try and find common ground, be relatable. Like a lot of it just comes down to how well do you understand the avatar, right? So I think a lot of sales teams under prepare by understanding the avatar, the prospect, and over-educate on the product. Like if I understand what a 45-year-old woman's suffering from, I can basically do the same sales call, and at the end of the call say I can pitch therapy, I could pitch weight loss, I could pitch a gym membership, I could pitch cleaning services. It doesn't really matter, because if I understand the avatar really well, I'll be able to speak to her pains.
And what you said is true, like brand is extremely powerful. And with the clients that we take on for our agency, do you recommend that we go for people with very strong brands and take that approach? Like that should always be the focus, right? Like always go for the brand, and then from there.
Yeah, strong brand, strong product, for sure. Fair question though. Yeah, relatability, common ground.
What's been the number one reason you've seen show up rates increase or decrease?
It's 100 golden babies, no silver bullets. So when we go into a company, we have something called a lead nurture checklist, and so it's just like 17 things that we do, and each one of them adds like 2 to 5%. And so that's how we can get something from like 30, 40% show rates to 85% show rates. It's just doing a lot of little things. So I would not look for like the one trick. It's just like, okay, how quickly are we responding? How much information do we provide them beforehand? Are we providing a personalized video? Like, can we give them a gift card for showing up that they can share a coffee with us? Like, just how many different things can we add in to increase the likelihood that they show? Can we create an open loop between the set and the close, that they're going to get information that they got their interest piqued? Is there a way that we can say that we're going to show them that we're going to do a certain amount of work on their behalf, and we're going to give them the deliverable on the next call? Right, so they have a huge incentive, they have huge curiosity, so that they would want to show up. Like, this is particularly true in insurance products. So like, we have an insurance company, and so like we create personalized insurance plans. It's like, okay, well, how do we get more people to show up? Well, we don't want to send them the insurance plan that we're going to make them before the call. We just say, we'll explain it to you on the call.
Yeah, we implement a lot of those tactics as well. Probably there's some stuff that you're doing that we currently don't have at the moment as well. I don't know if it makes sense to share on this call, but you said there's kind of like 17 things. Is it possible you could maybe like send it to us?
No. So,
oh no, sorry, man. All right.
Honestly, it really depends on what the business is. If we're looking at an insurance business versus a weight loss business, like, it's more applying a principle across. But that being said, the big one that's probably missing, like, it's usually the big obvious thing, which is we can always do the hundreds of little tactics, but you're trying to dodge bullets rather than like winning before you start, which is like, why do so few people trust you? Like, that's the big, like, I see the matrix. And then everything else becomes irrelevant. So for acquisition.com, our show rate on calls is nearly 100%. So if we say, hey, we'd like to find out more about your business. Today is Tuesday. Our next opening is Thursday of next week. So 9 days from now, show rate's still 100% because of brand. We actually don't need to do any of those tactics. Now, we have those tactics so that we can help the companies that don't have those level of brands. But like, you want to stack the deck. You want to answer the question, why does no one trust me? And solve that. Otherwise, you're always going to deal with these issues. Like, do the fundamentals for sure, but the big things that'll matter most is who you're choosing as your customers. So Vista, you guys heard of Vista Private Equity? So they're the biggest software private equity. They've got $1 gazillion, whatever. The way that they look at a business is that they do a customer analysis. And so they look for the 80-20, right? They look for the 20% of customers that are worth more than everyone else. And they then do a customer analysis and say, what do these 20% have that the other 80% don't? And then they exclusively look for customers that are that 20%, and then they say no to everyone else. And so then what happens is, if the sales velocity remains unchanged, they 5x the business. So sometimes you'll make more money just by saying no, so that you can have the capacity to say yes to the few guys that matter more. And if you're not getting more of those people, then solving that problem, rather than saying like, how do I polish a turd? Instead of going from that perspective, just saying like, maybe I just should not try to polish turds because it's still a turd. Right? And like, how do I get the people who are much better companies to be attracted to my business? And if you have a customer list that people aspire to be like, then you'll get more and more people. Like, that's like kind of the branding side for you guys, which is, how can I associate with better quality brands so that other better quality brands realize that what we do is legit? You can try and optimize the shit out of something, but like, usually it's the big obvious stuff, and we don't look at the big obvious stuff because they're actually harder problems to solve and they take longer. But it's where the most value is unlocked.
What's the ideal frequency and the topics of coaching calls that would increase the overall performance of setters and closers?
So I would say it's less about the topics of the calls and more about what you're training repeatedly and what you're rewarding. So sales is one of those really interesting businesses, or like, departments, that you can see very clearly. Like, you guys have probably seen different sales teams and they have very different cultures. And so it'd be like, what are the cultures that create the highest performance? In our experience, you can go on either extreme. You can have a very punishment-driven culture, which is very individualistic, or you can have a very team-driven culture, which is typically reward-based. What you want to reward is adherence to the script, not closing. Like, that's a huge shift for most sales teams. If you reward adherence to the script, then what happens is you get everyone to follow the script. Now, if they aren't closing, then you need to change the script. But it's much easier to change the script once you've taught adherence than it is to have a bunch of lone wolves who do anything they can to close the deal, which then impacts your brand. So like a really simple, tactic we did at one of our chains was we just said, cool, we'll give them $5 if they follow the script, whether they close now mind you, the tickets are smaller, right? It's just higher volume. We'll give them $5 if they follow the script. And if they close or they don't close, they get paid either way. You know what's interesting? The thing they're most curious about when they send their managers is, do I get the $5 for the adherence, even though they make 3 times more on the close. So we still give them benefits for closing, but they want to know whether they got the approval of the manager, because the $5 actually matters less than the approval from the manager saying you did a good job. The $5 is more of a token.
That makes a lot of sense.
And if you can imagine, because everybody here has sold before, if you got on a call and you knew that you could get paid no matter what just for following the process, it takes some of the pressure off. Like think about it. Like you hop in the car, like I'm just going to make sure that I get my bone no matter what on the adherence. But guess what happens when everybody adheres to the script? You fucking close more.
Bingo.
Because sales is one of the biggest issues where you have false positives, where someone goes rogue and then closes and basically gets reinforced for doing the wrong thing. And then they start doing the thing that they did that one time that worked, and then it doesn't work over and over again. So they change their behavior. They learn the wrong thing.
Right.
And so then you have to course correct, right? That's why sales, it's all about adherence. And then we can be really strategic about really making sure the script is beautiful and crisp and concise. And we just drill the team on adherence.